Thanks, John. I just want to really quickly thank John for running the cameras at 6 o'clock in the morning. Poor thing. I want to thank David for coming to my class to talk to my students about perception, communication, and technology. And I want to thank Todd LeBeau for making that awesome graphic. I know that brought a lot of you guys out there in, so thanks, Todd. Um, all right, so we're just going to go right into it. I just want David Amerland to introduce himself to my class. David, tell them a little bit about you and your guess as to why I had you come into my classroom today.
Okay, guys. First of all, I'm actually delighted to be here, and the audience is a lot different to what I normally have. I usually do this in a corporate setting, but the challenges which you guys are facing are probably right at the cutting edge of the wave. So let me tell you a little bit about what I do. My primary job is writing books. I look at the web, I look at trends, I carry out analysis, and I put together a synthesis of thought, which comes into the form of a book. But I also advise large multinationals on their social media strategy, and I also advise them a little bit on search. Now, I say a little bit on search because search, funnily enough, can be quantified and outsourced very easily, so they don't need a lot of help there. But when it comes to social media, for them it's very disruptive. And essentially, social media and technology are very much part of the communication challenge which we face today in terms of how the world is changing and how we are also changing with it. And let's begin with real basics first of all. And let's begin with technology and what it used to do. It used to be that every time we had any kind of technological breakthrough, it was simply a multiplication or an amplification of something current which the individual could do. So technology used to enable us as a person or as an individual to do something better or faster or at a lower cost. So therefore, it was a case of scaling things. It scaled strength, or it scaled speed, or it scaled volume, which brought the cost down. And technology still does that to a large extent. However, technology also does something else. These days, it disrupts the traditional silos of the world. It disrupts institutions, it disrupts countries and governments and nationalities, and it also disrupts the individual. And the moment it does that, we see something fundamental taking place. And that fundamental thing is the creation of a digital identity, which for the first time ever, we actually control at an individual level. Now, why do I mention all this? Because we think we know who we are, and you have a name and you have a physical presence, but these things historically were always ascribed to you. So who you were and who you became wasn't really part of your control. It was something which was given to you by birth, by perhaps your station in life, your family connections, the country you were born, the profession your parents had, and so on. We come into the digital 21st century, and this is no longer true anymore. You can go online and literally reinvent yourself and do it convincingly now, so you actually become a brand new person. And the moment we say something like this, we realize two things. The first one is the fluidity of identity, and it's linked to technology. The second thing is the A word, as in authentic. Is it real or is it made up? And is there a difference? Can we really tell? Alex mentioned previously your perception and communication. And perception is very critical in how we actually communicate. One of the things about when it comes to creating anything online is trust. And trust is really critical to anything, whether you're going to consume information or you're going to actually carry out a relational exchange with somebody. You're actually going to buy something, which means you need to give them money or your credit card details and pay something, and then they're going to send you something. Now, we never needed trust, ever, until we actually needed to buy things. And this is also a historical thing. If you're in an enclave where you have a tightly knit community group, or you're with your family, irrespective of how you get on with the people around you, there's always some kind of implicit trust there. Nothing explicitly mentioned, because that's how relationships work in a tightly knit group. The moment you step outside that, trust is critical. And trust is always a matter of perception, because it goes through 4 stages. The first one is contact, because somebody has to make contact with you. The second stage is perception, how you perceive them through that contact. And this is really critical because in an offline setting, obviously, we have a number of cues which we're hardwired to analyze and reach a critical assessment of. But in an online setting, we don't really have those physical clues. So really we need, in the vacuum which is created, to sort of insert new ones, which is where the reinvention of identity comes in. And if you pass the perception test of how trustworthy or how authentic somebody is, then you go to an assessment stage where you actually begin to see if they are exactly what you thought they were. And then you get into the stage where you basically have made a connection with them. And these are the 4 stages which happen irrespective of whether you're actually meeting a new friend on Facebook or on Google+, or somebody's marketing to you and they have to convince you that what they give you is what you think they should be giving you. So these are the challenges which we face both at an individual level and at a corporate level, which is why everything has been disrupted to that extent. The silos of the past really don't exist anymore. When corporations which have up to 50, 150,000 workforce face the same challenge that the individual faces when he gets on Facebook or Twitter and tries to project a personal identity, then we realize that the world has begun to change fundamentally, and we're in brand new territory. The first thing I'll tell you about this is that the rules haven't been written yet. We're making them up as we go along through constant testing, assessment, and retesting. The second thing is that everything is escalating, and this is something which you probably see in your own lives. Things are becoming faster in terms of how relationships are formed. Technology is pushing us the ways we can actually connect and consume information, and certainly in terms of the knowledge which you can actually get, we are in a world of plenty. We never had it so good in terms of what we can find out. I'm going to take a small pause here so you can ask me any questions before I go on further, so just feel free to ask. And really, there is no question that can possibly be stupid in this setting.
Oh, don't you wish he was your teacher? Doesn't, like, everything he says just sounds so smart. Paul, do you want to ask the question that you all had for him? Okay. What was one of your questions?
Are you bilingual or a polyglot, and if so, has that helped you in your career?
Well, I grew up in Australia and I lived most of my life in Britain, so I suppose that makes me bilingual. I'm not. I'm very bad with languages, I must say. I speak a little bit of French and I speak a little bit of Greek. Now, it does help, and I'll tell you why it helps. Because you can't really divorce a language from its culture. So yes, you can learn the words, but you really, in order to actually use a language, you need to understand a little bit of the mindset of the culture behind it. And the moment you do that, you open up all sorts of doors into connections and assumptions and deeper understanding. So when we talk, I mean, sometimes when you change countries, and I must say, over the last 20 years, I have lived in 6 different countries in 3 different continents. So I've moved around a lot. Every time I change country, there's always a culture shock, and it has nothing to do with the language. When I moved from Australia to Britain, there was a huge culture shock. When I went to Miami and stayed there for 6 months, there was again a culture shock to overcome. And when we use the word culture shock, we actually understand that every community, and essentially a country or a city, has a community of its own. Every community has its own unwritten rules, which allow those people who live in it to actually get on with each other and move on in a very effective, economical way. And when you sort of drop into that community without a gentle introduction of any kind, then you realize that the culture which you took for granted where you lived is no longer active, and you have to learn new heuristics and new shortcuts in order to function effectively. And what that shows, in a way, are the differences in cultures or communities which are the direct result of the challenges they face, and also, at the same time, the similarities, because obviously if we can function in different cultures, all we have to do is relearn a few things. That means that a huge set of fundamentals are the same. and as people, we're driven by them. So we just need to, every time, to make a few adjustments. And that's what I've learned from moving around, and every time I attempted to learn a language, that mindset has helped me understand it a little bit better.
That's fantastic. Quick quiz. Does anybody remember what we've been calling that in class? The cultural background that you come from and its effect on your perception?
Context.
Frame of reference. Thank you, Joseph. That's what we call it in communication. Joseph, do you really really quickly want to ask your question?
Yeah. On a corporate level, how detrimental can it be when the corporation misperceives the audience that it's trying to?
That is okay. It is so detrimental. Yeah, it can be so detrimental that they actually, especially now. I mean, in the past it didn't, and that's a very good question. So let me take it back a few years back, and let's go to the year 2000, which is basically the edge of the last century. And how did we assume, or how did we perceive the word trust and authority in a corporation in the past? We did it through cues, which revolved around cost, i.e. the cost of their advertising, how glitzy the packaging was in what they sold, how big the headquarters were wherever they were, how impressive was the logo and how often we saw it. And the reason all those things impressed us is because we understood there was a huge cost behind them, which meant that the corporation had taken a certain amount of seriousness in what they were doing, and they were highly unlikely to actually want to do something bad. And that's how we establish that trust in our perception of them. We get into a social media world of today, and these things really don't matter anymore because we know that it never really mattered. We can actually see that. And we know that what they really need to do is to show us that they understand us at a personal level, they can speak our language, and they can actually show us that they are people. They're not faceless automatons, because we don't trust their motives as faceless automatons. But if they're people, then we have that common frame of reference, which can establish a bi-directional flow of communication, which means that, hey, yes, you want to sell me something, and yes, I want to buy it, but I understand that you have actually put some thought in what I need rather than what you want to sell, and you're unlikely now to cheat me, essentially. So taking this back to your question, every time a corporation goes into different countries, and this is very topical because only just at the edge of last year, I was in Singapore advising corporations who had moved into China, which is a hugely different culture, and they were facing huge problems there. So every time they change culture, they need to acclimatize. They need to understand the mindset and the pressure points of the audience they're actually talking to, and then adjust what they're doing in order to actually talk to them at their language. And if they fail to do that, it doesn't matter how good the product is, it doesn't matter how good the price is, they are always going to stumble and there are always going to be problems. So this answers your question, how critical it is. This is why corporations now need to actually move in a different way and need to move in a more fluid environment when it comes to their marketing.
That's great. If you have to leave, I totally get it. You're welcome to go. But Joseph, yeah, why don't you ask your follow-up question real quick?
How often are anthropologists used in this process, figuring out the culture?
I can answer that. They're not used at all. So most corporations still use a traditional marketing approach. What happens is they have the marketing department and the PR department, and they all get together, they agree some kind of campaign, there's some money to be spent, they've got an agency, the agency comes up with a campaign, they show it, and all the way when it goes to the C-suite, somebody says, yeah, great, let's run with it. What happens then in that traditional setting is that things begin to go wrong because they go into the market and they get wrong-footed, and then they got to go into damage control. When they go into damage control, they need to assess why the campaign did not work. And when they say, well, it didn't work, they call somebody like me in who tells them that, hey, you're using North American marketing methods into a Chinese market, which goes by word of mouth and has a huge distrust of anything large and monolithic. So then they go, great, okay, we understand that. How do we change? And from my perspective, the change is always very easy, but from theirs it isn't, because in order for them to change, they need to change internally, which means departments need to communicate differently. The people who make the products, for instance, need to be actively involved in the communication of the values of those products, and usually they're not. The PR people need to be distanced from any kind of marketing, because they're usually interested in presenting the kind of image which is unlikely to connect with the audience. And marketing needs now to understand that it's not just selling something which is technocratic, i.e. it doesn't need to tell me the ingredients or the capabilities or what it's going to do. It also needs to tell me why the company is actively involved in marketing this kind of product. And this is unique because here we come into the human element. If I can't understand why a corporation does something, then I can't connect with it, and I'm unlikely to actually give it my business. If it's a virtual monopoly, I might, but I do it reluctantly. And the moment I have an alternative, I'm going to jump. So this is so disruptive to the traditional way of marketing that large corporations are beginning gradually to change internally, changing their reporting mechanisms, changing the way they connect and communicate with each other. And what's becoming evident is that the word trust, which we use so easily outside the corporation, in terms of, hey, you need to trust us because we are XYZ and we're doing something. When it comes to a corporate environment, it's almost non-existent. So really, they need to work hard now to create trust mechanisms and trust structures within the organization so that they can feel that they can trust their workforce to present the right message, they can trust their workforce to actually put in emotional content in the work, not just what they pay you for, and connect at a human level. That is changing every kind of business which is active today towards a social business model. And it's a very slow process. It's baby steps all the way. So we have started seeing the beginning of this process. By the time we get to 2025, probably, there'll be no corporation which hasn't actually got there or is almost there, and those who haven't will no longer be active.
Great questions, Joseph. All right, David. Well, they have to go to their next class or back to sleep. But thank you so much for coming to my class and giving them an overview of perception and communication today. John, if you will take us out, we'll see everybody next Thursday, hopefully, weather permitting.
It is a delight. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you.
David, and an honor to have you here. Thank you so much, everybody. My mic is echoing, so I'm just going to make this. Actually, Alex, my mic is echoing, so if you would take us out, that would be fantastic. Okay.
Okay. Well, we will see you all hopefully next Thursday with a new guest. I'll probably eventually bring Martin Shervington in at some point. But yeah, see you next Thursday. This was Glass in the Class, attempt number 1. Give us feedback. Look forward to seeing you all in class.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you again, David Amerland. Honor having you on.
Likewise. Bye-bye.
Bye now.